Song of the Chattahoochee by Sidney Lanier, 1842 to 1881. Out of the hills of Habersham, down the valleys of Hall, I hurry amain to reach the plain, run the rapid and leap the fall. Split at the rock and together again, accept my bed, or narrow or wide, and free from folly on every side, with a lover's pain to attain the plain, far from the hills of Habersham, far from the valleys of Hall. All down the hills of Habersham, all through the valleys of Hall, the rushes cried, "Abide, abide!" The willful waterweeds held me in thrall. The laving laurel turned my tide, the ferns and the fondling grass said, "Stay!" The dewberry dipped for to work delay, and the little reed sighed, "Abide, abide!" Here in the hills of Habersham, here in the valley of Hall. High o'er the hills of Habersham, veiling the valleys of Hall, the hickory told me manifold fair tales of shade. The poplar tall wrought me her shadowy self to hold. The chestnut, the oak, the walnut, the pine, overleaning with flickering meaning and sign, said, "Pass not so cold these manifold deep shades of the hills of Habersham, these glades in the valleys of Hall." And oft in the hills of Habersham, and oft in the valleys of Hall, the white quartz shone, and the smooth brook stone did bar me of passage with friendly brawl, and many a luminous jewel lone, crystals clear, or a cloud with mist, ruby, garnet, and amethyst, made lures with the lights of streaming stone, in the clefts of the hills of Habersham, in the valley of Hall. But oh, not the hills of Habersham, and oh, not the valleys of Hall avail. I am fain for to water the plain, downward the voices of duty call, downward to toil and be mixed with the main. The dry fields burn, and the mills are to turn, and a myriad flowers mortally yearn, and the lordly main from beyond the plain calls o'er the hills of Habersham, calls through the valleys of Hall. Okay, so let's see. This is a poem about a river. It's a poem about the river Chattahoochee. It's in Georgia in the United States, and Sidney Lanier is or was considered a Confederate poet. He fought for the Confederates in the American Civil War, and unfortunately he got tuberculosis and it died at the age of 39. Now, this poem is describing this river which comes down from the hills of Habersham and goes through the valleys of Hall. And it's describing all of the different things that happen to it, and the significance of the river as well. Okay, so out of the hills and down the valleys, this is very clear. I hurry amain to reach the plain. So amain it means with all its might. So I'm working really hard to reach the plain. Yeah? To run the rapids and jump down the falls, to split at the rock and come together again. Accept my bed, the river bed, narrow or wide, and flee from folly, from crazy activities, from crazy actions on either side of the river, with a lover's pain to attain the plain. So my duty, my ambition, my aim is to get to the plains, far from the hills of Habersham, far from the valleys of Hall. Okay, so the water comes down out of the hills and down out of the mountains, and it needs to get to the plains where water is needed. All down the hills of Habersham, all through the valleys of Hall, the rushes cried, "Abide, abide." So the rushes are telling the river, "Stay with us, don't leave, don't leave." Yeah. The willful waterweeds held me in thrall. So the willful, the stubborn waterweeds held me in a trance. And the laving laurel, so laving, the washing laurel turned my tide. So the plants are trying to stop the river from leaving. They want it to stay. Don't go down to the plain, stay here with us. Yeah? And the ferns and the fondling grass said stay. To fondle is to touch lovingly. So the ferns and the grass are saying stay, stay, don't go. And the dewberry dipped for to work delay. So the dewberry's swimming in the river to delay its work. Yeah? And the little reeds sighed, the little plants sighed, "Abide, abide." Here in the hills of Habersham, here in the valley of Hall. So all of these plants, this gives the idea of the different colours, the plants, the life, the movement of all of these different plants in Habersham and in Hall in Georgia. High o'er the hills of Habersham, veiling the valleys of Hall, the hickory told me manifold fair tales of shade. So, the hickory is a tree, yeah, and the hickories it is a very tall tree, and it's telling stories of shade. The poplar tall wrought me her shadowy self to hold. Okay, so all of the plants are fixated. They're interested by shade and by sunshine. The poplar tall wrought me her shadowy self to hold. The chestnut, the oak, the walnut, the pine, o'erleaning with flickering meaning and sign. So all of these plants, they are competing for the light, yeah, and the river is underneath is shaded, and they say, "Pass not so cold these manifold deep shades." So don't go so quickly, yeah. Only a little bit of light is filtering through, and the trees are telling the river not to go, to stay there. Yeah, the river gets colder as it's going through the trees. Yeah, deep in the shades of the hills of Habersham, these glades, these valleys, these flat areas in the valley of Hall. And oft in the hills of Habersham, and oft in the hills of Hall, the white quartz shone, and the smooth brook stone did bar me of passage with friendly brawl. So here there are now it comes to an area where there is white quartz, and these are the smooth stones that are on the river, and the river had to fight with these stones to keep flowing, even though it was a friendly fight. But they were these stones, and this quartz, which is mined in the valley, is trying to stop the river's way, to keep it back. Yeah. And many a luminous jewel lone, crystals clear or a cloud with mist, ruby, garnet and amethyst. So there are all sorts of beautiful stones in the river. Yeah, and these made lures with the lights of streaming stone. So they're trying to lure the river, these precious stones, into staying. Yeah, stay here. Yeah, to draw the river in. And these are in the clefts, in the cracks of the hills of Habersham, in the beds of the valley of Hall. Okay, so now it's going through an area where there are precious stones and there are quartz. But oh, not the hills of Habersham, and oh, not the valleys of Hall avail. So they don't avail. They're not successful. Yeah. I am fain for to water the plain. So it's my goal. My life force is to put water in the plain. Downward the voices of duty call. So further downriver, the my duty. There, I'm being called to my duty. Notice the capital D. This is probably saying that God has ordained the river to come down and to water the plain. Downward to toil and be mixed with the main. So the river comes down, and the river water needs to work to add itself to the fields and go down and be mixed with the main. The main is the high seas. The dry fields burn and the mills are to turn. So the river has to quench the thirst of the burning hot fields and to turn the water mills. And a myriad flowers mortally yearn. So there are thousands of flowers that are dying for my water. And the lordly main from beyond the plain calls o'er the hills of Habersham, calls through the valleys of Hall. So the sea, the main, is calling the river, and it's the river's duty to go all the way down. And here clearly this is saying that the plain needs this water for the land to be able to grow, and the sea is calling it, and it's got to go down. This is its work. This is what its duty is. Yeah, and the trees and the plants want it to stay, but the river has to go to the plain to work and serve people and grow crops. And maybe this is the idea of the rebuilding of the South after the Civil War. So enough. If you enjoyed the video, give it a rating, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you soon. Bye for now. Song of the Chattahoochee by Sidney Lanier.